Paul, welcome to another Parenting Athletic Kids Essentials podcast. Great to have you back.
Great to be back. Let's go.
Let's do it. So we're going to talk today about finding the balance between basically how hard do I push, how much do I specialize, like different things in the balance that we find with youth sports. When am I going too hard or asking my son or daughter to go too hard versus when am I being too easy? Like there definitely can be a line on both sides. So let's talk about first, just finding that balance. Let's talk about this. We've done this in other podcasts. Let's go through age groups because I think it'll be different at different age. Yep. So let's start, Paul. I'm going to have you start with that younger age group, maybe kind of 6 to 10. Where do parents find this balance and how hard to push, or am I pushing too hard?
Yep. I think that younger kids, so that 6 to 10 age group that you're talking about, they are very naturally more present at any given time. And so a lot of what that means for this conversation about balance is that if we're trying to have them have mental balance, that's probably also being aware of physically what they're doing and how much of it they are doing. So when we talk about the topic of specialization and when that becomes appropriate or not, and when burnout can take place during that, I think back to okay, so if that athlete, and if he's 7 years old, he or she is 7 years old and is trying to have some balance in their life, that probably means that, playing one sport at that age is not good because physically they need to be doing something different, whether it's another sport or another activity or just balancing the amount of time you're spending at home, family dinners, where, as you know, those family dinners probably become less and less as they get into high school because their activities will consume that time of night all the time. So the balance honestly does have to be very tied to the amount of time they are spending, in my opinion, at that younger age. I can't wait to talk about some of the older ages and in some of the goals that you have when that time is honestly not something you can really give up if you want to be dedicated to something. But at the younger age, I think it's really important that we're very aware of the actual amount of time spent being very tied to the mental balance that we're searching for on this topic for young athletes.
So where would you how would you define that, or where would the line be? How would a parent grasp that, say, okay, I've got to be aware of how much time they are doing? I think it's different for different kids, right? So knowing your kid, I just did the podcast with my older son, Will, last night, and he talked about how at younger ages, he liked doing multiple sports. Like he was he needed to burn energy. So it wasn't so much about guiding him towards one, but it was like how do we stay busy?
Yeah,
that was his thing. So any thoughts on that? Like, how do parents actually say, okay, this is about a kind of a time-based thing, where do I lean into that? How do parents do that?
I think you probably as parents have the best idea of looking at your athlete or your child and asking if they're still thriving in that environment that they're in. I think a lot of times there's a lot of benefit to some newness and some freshness on just a new sport or activity, or, hey, I finally get a night at home to just sit and watch TV. I'm not saying we want to have too many of those versus being active, but there's some times where it's like, man, I just get a night at home with my family with a meal and whatever's on TV, and I'm good with that. And you'll notice your athlete thrive in that. And then maybe the newness of a new sport, like basketball season now, and he starts to practice and he's super excited about it. And you can tell that they're thriving is the word that I tend to use. Whereas that basketball practice started in November. Okay, I'm still playing basketball next July. They're like, gosh, we're still doing this thing, and they're not thriving anymore, right? So until you can get to the point where you have things that are deeper or more continual that can push them through some of that grind and still make it be something that they love to do, the younger they are, it's just really hard because eventually that same sport, same activity over and over and over again just becomes a lot. So that's kind of the best way I can think about it is just recognize whether or not they're thriving or not. And when they stop thriving, I'm not saying if there's 2 weeks left in the season, you got to quit, but just don't let them be so specialized for that reason, because they'll probably stop being joyful going to it, stop thriving within it. And thriving does not mean having more success, scoring more points, winning more games. It just means like mentally, am I in a great place when I go to this activity or not?
Love it. It all comes back to communication and kind of paying attention to the bigger picture. I think as I went through this with my kids, it was a little bit of a learning process. Like, was that season, did it feel a little too long? Did we play too many tournaments? I think especially during the winter time in Minnesota in the sports, it can become tough. Like, it's not just throw on your shorts and head out the door. There's a lot that goes into different things. So yeah, paying attention to that. Again, parents communicating with your kids, even at 6, 7 years old. Are you thriving? Are you enjoying this? And then kind of paying attention season to season, year to year. Was that too much? Was that the right amount? Making a mental note and knowing the next year, let's back off, or we can do more, or whatever it might be. Yeah. What about the end season? Not just the balance of how much to play, but how hard do we push? Right, like at 7, 8 years old. Let's get into that a little bit. Like how hard are we? You know what? We want them to be the best 7-year-old or 8-year-old, and they say they want to be really good. And how do we navigate that line?
Yeah. So if we're talking about how hard are we pushing as far as the balance between fun and enjoyment versus results, and I don't mean results in the standpoint of talking about results is bad, because when you get older, like we start talking about whether or not what you're doing to go to the field is correlating to better performances. That's part of being in competitive athletics. But when you're young, to me, balance isn't even the right word as far as like, how hard are we pushing to say, I want to go to the baseball field and play catch with you because I need you to throw more strikes. Like, it's got to happen. Not at 7, 8. Like, if you've lost the fact that I want to go to the baseball field and play catch with you because that's an enjoyable thing that athlete wants to do, or at least you are attempting to make it be about that. Balance isn't even the word. It's like, you need to make sure you're actually way over here, I think, on that perspective. So I don't know if I'm hitting that question super well, or what thoughts you have on that, or whether I answered that or not. But balance, as far as how hard to push, it's really about pushing enjoyment and pushing fun, it's hard to push those things, but we all know that environments can be created where it's simply enjoyable versus, I really need you to get better at, your backhand, or I really need you to get better at free throws because you missed too many of them this past tournament. There's a time and a place for that when they get older, just not yet. Not right now, in my opinion. I don't know what thoughts you have on that based on the question you asked, but
no, 100%. I don't think there should be a balance. It should be all, we're just going out to have fun. So yeah. But to your point, like, how do you challenge that? How do you push that? It's just that being the whole focus, and any conversations are had around, did you have fun today? Did you enjoy that? Are you meeting a lot of new kids, or how's your teammates? All those kinds of things, not leaning into to your point, we got to get better at A, B, and C. Again, if they come to you at 7 or 8 years old and say, hey, I want to hit a little bit more, I don't feel like I'm hitting, great, let's go down to the park, let's have some fun, let's hit some balls. But it's not the parent's job, for sure, at 6 to 10 to be trying to develop a professional baseball player, or even a high school baseball player. The job is to make sure they're having a blast. So
the beauty of what you said there, though, Trev, was that they came to you and said, yeah, I'd like to go hit more, I'd like to go do more. So we have a good podcast a few back that it talks about autonomy, like how much autonomy they're taking over their development. I think if they're coming to you and saying they want to do more, and that's truthfully what they're saying, I don't think we should ever push away from that unless you feel like it's very wrapped up in like an unhealthy identity with the sport, which, again, not trying to add layers and complicate things more. But if they're saying they want to go do it, I mean, far be it from you to say not to, because they're taking ownership of their process, which we talked about in that podcast being something that you may not see until they're 10 or older, right? Like how often does a 7-year-old do that? and they're thinking in their mind, I want to go do that because I want to improve, versus like, no, I really like playing catch with my dad. I really like going to the gym and messing around with my buddies and shooting hoops. Like, those are different things, but they're taking autonomy over their schedule and their time and their balance internally on their own, which is a very encouraging thing, actually.
Love it. And it's always walking that line, even at that age of, yeah, are they wrapping their identity in this? Like, they had a bad game, so that's why we're going to go hit. Well, is that so bad? No. Like, we want to teach them that if they work hard at something, that they'll improve at it. But even in those instances, like going out there and having fun with it, so that they want to do it again, not grinding through it. Oh, we got to hit X amount of balls. Oh, we're going to do, this physical drill till we get it right. Like, just having fun, free play, gamifying it. A lot of people that have been on this podcast have mentioned that term, like making a game out of it. How far can you hit the ball? Kids are really into that these days. So that's really good. Let's jump into the next age range, kind of the 10 to 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Do we start pushing a little harder at this age? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you have to the extent to which you can honestly say that they would like to, like meaning they would like that. And this is what's so hard, because a lot of my fear for this podcast is that we come across as a very pie in the sky view, as if we don't understand that at 9 years old, they start making AAA, AA, single A teams. And that socially has a lot of things. And parents, you certainly are wrapped up in that. And I don't fault you for that in any way. And we are a club that, starts to have top team, second team at 10 years old. And like, so pie in the sky view of this is not at all how we're trying to come across. So for me to say, like, just as long as they want it to happen, I also understand that you as parents, you're going to want it to happen. You really do, because you want it for your kid. You might want it for, you enjoy the parent group that's on one team and maybe not so much on the other team. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I don't mean to get off on a tangent or a side note on any of that, but 10 to 14U, hopefully you're honestly able to assess whether or not your athlete is ready to be pushed, because you think that they can take some ownership of that versus not. I have a lot of thoughts on the 14U and up about, like, no, it's kind of time now, like it's go time. 10 to 14U can look everything like, 6 to 10 years old, like we just talked about, or it could look like the 14 and up, where kids are starting to get pretty serious about this from something that they want to have for their careers. So I don't think that answered the question really at all, other than just like, can you honestly assess how much of that they want to take on their own shoulders is really it.
No, I think that's great. And this is true again at any age. Like, what are their goals? What's important to them? But yeah, some kids at this age will say, what, I want to be on the top team, or I want to be on AAA or whatever. And then it becomes the negotiation. Maybe your kid says, you know what, I'm just having fun. Like, I think that almost makes it easier. Takes the pressure off. But that kid, maybe that's between AA and AAA, and how hard do I push? Again, parents, it's not our role to push. It's our role to supply the situations, the coaching, anything our kid needs for what they want to achieve. So if their goals again are to make the AAA team, okay, here's what it will take to make that, having those conversations. Is this something you want to do? And again, going back to the character traits of what it's going to take to make that, not emphasizing outcome, but emphasizing, okay, it's going to take a certain amount of work ethic, showing up for those 6 a.m. lifts. Even at 11, I mean, you're doing that at 10 to 14, right? That's part of it. So making sure they understand this is what it's going to take, and that they're good with it. And then they're taking ownership. This is where this goes back to the intrinsic motivation piece. They're having the autonomy in it. They're taking the reins on it. They feel like they have good relationships around them, good coaching around them. Their peers are a lot of fun, and that they're seeing some some results, some progress from their growth. So those three things to really be aware of at this age range. Again, are they taking ownership of it? Do they have great relationships? And are they seeing some progress, some results through it? That will stay motivating to them. That will keep them pushing through this age range. Anything on that you would add to that?
No, I really like how you started to talk about the fact that seeing some results as kind of the fruit of their work towards it. I'm not saying that a pre-10-year-old can't do that, but it's oftentimes very fleeting because again, they're like incredibly present. Like young kids are just very like whatever's happening right now is how I feel, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about. It's just like right now. At 10 to 14, when they start to see some more delayed gratification actually work, like that's actually a pretty foundational thing to how you're going to view the rest of your life is like, I delayed like this thing that I'm doing right now that maybe wasn't as fun as it could be, led to some good things happening in the future. Is a cool thing to start asking yourself how much you can show those correlations with your athlete. As a parent, I think that's a fun thing and a really cool way to put it that I didn't think anything about or think of until you had said it. So I like that part a lot for sure.
Love it. And again, I'm just thinking about my kids and kids I've worked with, and you've done the same thing through these ages. What's important, again, not to over de-emphasize other things, but parents, it's our role to just provide whatever the kid needs, whatever they want, whatever their goals are, whatever they're passionate about, and try super hard not to lean into what we think is important. Because the things that we're trying to lean into just come from our past, how we were parented, how we were coached. If we thought we could have worked harder when we were at 14 years old and we would have made the higher team, like none of these things matter to our sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't. So we have to let them, again, we have some lessons we've learned, and mostly those lessons should be around what are we supplying? Are we giving our sons or daughters, are we supplying them with the opportunities to have whatever kind of success they want to achieve whatever their goals are? Are we giving them opportunities? And then we should be able to back off from trying to push, motivate, drive. It has to come from within.
Good.
Anything? Okay, let's go to that next age group, kind of the high school years. How hard do we push at that age?
Before I get too far into what I'm going to say next, I would say that it is okay all the way up and as old as they would like to do it, where there are some activities that they may not actually care about trying to be as good as they can possibly be at it. I think about intramural sports in college. I think about different things where they're like, well, yes, this is just an activity for me that I enjoy. But if we are specifically talking about an athlete that would like to be as good as they can be, or at least feel like they're being as good as they can be at something. I had my master's program advisor. He was the professor for many of my classes. He would talk about this a lot. The notion that you will be able to have balance in your time in life and still want to be elite at something or as good as you can possibly be at something is just not attainable. So you need to know that right up front. If you would like to be as good as you can possibly be at something, you will have to spend a disproportionate amount of your time doing it that other people that aren't trying to strive for that don't have to do. So just know that right up front. And I think to myself, what the end goal is of the term balance. I think the end goal of balance, when we're talking about a high school level or beyond athlete, is whether or not they can maintain mental health through a schedule that actually is very disproportionately skewed towards that activity. Because the bad part of an imbalance that some people would say is that they're no longer mentally healthy in their identity. They're no longer mentally healthy in their ability to be motivated to do something. And they just are basically slaves to that schedule And it's not something that you would look at and be like, oh, that's good for that person. So many very successful people are able to maintain a very healthy, like mentally healthy place while having insane commitment from a time perspective towards that activity. And so for us as mental performance coaches or just coaches in general, it's okay that we demand a schedule, whether it's a calendar schedule that says, hey, you want to be a top basketball player, hockey player, baseball player? Guess what? You are going to play that sport year round. That is just the reality of it in today's world, unless you are a one percenter of a one percenter from a freak athletic standpoint. Most people can't do that. If you're able to look at that and demand that of your athlete, just make sure that they're trying to have the end goal of balance, which is mental health through all of that. And if you're able to do that, I think that so many people can have an imbalanced schedule and still thrive in that environment. And that's something that I thought was very well laid out by that advisor that I had, that I still keep in touch with. He works with like Olympic level athletes. So I'm not saying that's what we're dealing with, but just don't search for balance in your time nowadays if you would like your athlete to be at the very, very top. And I know that can come across maybe a certain type of way, but I just think that's the truth in the world that we live in today.
That's really good. I think, again, parents, it circles back. I keep going back to this, but understanding what the goals of the athlete are. So if their goals are to just be having a lot of fun with their peers, the time balance can be different than if the goal is to play Division I college sports or professional sports or whatever it might be. But again, we have to have these conversations with our sons and daughters about what that looks like and about, is that actually, okay, if they want to spend after school, they want to spend the next 6 hours, 5 hours within the sport, is it really something they want to do? And again, it comes back to me, as parents, we can't be pushing this at this age. So we have to have conversations. Both parties, parents and the athlete, have to understand up front the commitment that it's going to take. And then we support them in that commitment. But if we're trying to drive that commitment at 15, 16 years old, it's going to be awful. It's going to be bad for everybody involved. So you're kind of setting this foundation. I talked about this in another podcast with Dominic Robinson. Like, he was talked about setting this foundation at 6 to 10, 10 to 14, and then at 15, 16, it's either built or it isn't. And they have to understand the commitment level that it's going to take. Balance is probably, just like it was at 6 to 10, balance is probably a bad word at 15, 16 plus. Yeah. Maybe we should have a different word, but it is about figuring out what's important at that age, and then the athlete being committed to that, and us as parents being able to step back and just enjoy watching them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
So to try to maintain that type of kind of mental health through all of a schedule that will be very unbalanced, I think the most powerful way to do that is, and you don't always get a choice for every single player they're in a program with, every single coach that coaches them. Like, sometimes you just have to know that this is what you signed up for. But the people that they are surrounded with while they're doing those activities is the single most important thing, as far as how they will view it as, like, I continue to be joyful despite the fact that this is my 6th day of practice this week for 7 straight weeks. Like, the people that they go to those places with and are surrounded with, and that they're pouring into and that are pouring into them, will be the most important thing in that. So if your athlete is very set on, at least they're saying they're very set on wanting to push themselves as far as they can go, I think Division I college athletics, like, there are some things that you have to have, I don't want to say gifted to you, but there are a lot of people that can push as hard as they want to for as long as they want to. And their ceiling is actually Division III college sports. but we're just as proud of them as anybody else because they pushed themselves as far as they could go. But if the end goal is to push yourself as far as you can go, and they say that, and yet they're still like, this is tough, this is tough, this is tough, I want you to look at whether or not the place they are going to, the people they're surrounded with are, and the community that they're a part of is playing any role in that. So don't look at the activity in a vacuum. Look at who it is that they're going to those things with. You'll probably find your answers as to helping them be more passionate about it or less, or joyful about it or less, going to each of those activities. Really good. That circles me back to the intrinsic motivation thing, and it's more than just intrinsic motivation. It's how we find passion in our pursuits on an ongoing basis is these three things, and the one you just touched on: surrounding yourself with people you like to be with, people that motivate you, people that have great energy givers, having some autonomy in it, and seeing some progress. So kind of you covered all three of those things right there. So parents, as you're thinking about how do I best support / push / find this balance, is my son or daughter having autonomy in their process? Are they leading the process? Number one. Number two, are they surrounded by great people? And number three, are they seeing progress? Are they seeing growth? And again, to Paul's point, it might not be growth towards professional sports or growth towards Division I, but are they feeling growth? Are they feeling like, so that will not only circle them back to intrinsic motivation, but also a joy for the game, a joy for whatever they're doing, passion for whatever they're doing. So if you can really hone in on those three areas, I think you're going to do a great job at finding a balance. And again, communication with your son or daughter about what they want to do, and are they enjoying this process. Good. Any other thoughts? We'll wrap this puppy up. I think we hit that pretty good through the ages. Any other thoughts to wrap it up? No, I think that was good. All right, awesome. Paul, thanks for being here once again. Parents, if you have questions on this topic or any other topic, feel free to email me at mindratetraining@gmail.com, or jump on the message boards within your Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever account you're following us on. Go ahead and message me, ask any questions, and Paul and I will dig into those. Paul, thanks again, man, and we'll see you again real soon. Yep, see you soon. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. If you want more information on strategies that you can use to help optimize your son or daughter's athletic experience, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.